Well, I guess we better discuss this one before it gets scrubbed from the internet. What's up, gang? It is I, Carlton Flowers of the Go Political channel, and I want to do a reaction video to something that I just found by mistake here from News Nation. And I think this video is a couple of years old. Let me scroll down here. Yeah, this was a year ago, more than a year ago. And I'm telling you what, there's just so much in this little 5-minute video that makes me really scratch my head. And I wanted to do a reaction to this. In fact, I recorded it just in case to save it, because I think it is going to get scrubbed, because what we are seeing going on right now, there's a lot of stories and evidence and videos being scrubbed from the internet that are in relation to Kamala Harris, who is currently the front runner, the pick for the office, or running for the office of the presidency, although she did not receive any votes. So that's a whole nother topic, that we have a presidential candidate of the Democratic Party that was chosen by non-democratic processes. But at any rate, let's play this video and you'll know what this relates to as soon as I start it. But we'll just kind of work through this and I'll react as we go along. Here we go. Roll the video.
The administration did task Vice President Kamala Harris with the issue of migrant crossings, naming her the so-called border czar.
And that was just 2 months. Did you hear what she said? This is over a year ago. Let's play that one more time, just so you can be sure that you heard what I just heard.
And the Biden administration did task Vice President Kamala Harris with the issue of migrant crossings, naming her the so-called border czar.
And that was just
naming her the so-called border czar. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. Back when this video was done, there were no complaints from anyone, Democrats, supporters, whomever. There was no one refuting the fact that she was being put in charge of the migrant situation, and people were saying border czar. This is over a year ago. But now we're hearing in the news all of this outrage on media channels that are primarily left-leaning. They're all outraged that the opponents, the Republicans or conservatives, are talking about the fact that she was a failed border czar, and they're saying that she was never named the border czar. Now, it's just a name, okay? So forget the name. No one can refute the fact that several, I guess, months, couple years ago, that President Biden tasked Kamala Harris, Kamala, with being the border czar, or taking charge of the situation with the crisis at the southern border of the United States. Nobody was outraged and arguing with these news outlets that were calling her the border czar. But now today, they're raising hell. They're raising hell. We even have members of Congress saying, well, no, she was never named the border czar. What's that? When did that happen? Well, let's move on. And then we're going to talk about some other things that just don't add up. And it seems like we're erasing history, and we're being told to just turn a blind eye to this. But let's just continue the video. You'll see what I mean.
2 months into the new administration, and here are the facts now. Very little new policy has come out of the White House since that decision. Since Harris was named border czar in March of last year, she made her first and still only visit to the border 3 months later. The plan devised by the White House was to address migration in Central and South American.
Now, again, look at the title. VP Harris, 18 months as border czar. Border czar. And border czar is highlighted in yellow. nobody was complaining back then. Well, let's continue on.
Countries. At that time, there were 188,000 migrant encounters in July of 2021. 1 year later, that number has jumped to just shy of 200,000.
And Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill, is joining.
Now, I'm going to go back to this thing because I want to discuss a few things that are on this timeline. So first of all, she's named the border czar, which we're not supposed to talk about now, and we're told that that never existed and that Republicans, opponents, are making that up out of thin air. Although it was talked about back then, and no one had a mumbling complaint, not a mumbling word about Kamala Harris being the border czar. So, March 24th of 2021, Vice President Harris named border czar. And there's no outrage and no protest. But there it is, right there on this old video. Next, June 25th, 2021, and I remember this. She went down to visit El Paso and the southern border. Onward, July 29, 2021, she announced a strategy to address the root causes. I'm going to do a reaction video to that interview because that interview was absurd. And some of the things that she was asked, I couldn't believe the answers that she was giving. But she was going to address the root causes. That's 2021. Okay, so moving on. By July 31st of the same year, CBP records state that 188,829 migrant encounters had occurred along the border. Moving right along to July the 31st of 2022, CBP records 199,976 migrant encounters along the border. One side note that I'll give you, did you know that the number of migrants or illegal aliens, which now is a bad word. We can't say illegal aliens. That's racist. That's bad. I don't know why. The number of illegal aliens that have entered this country since this administration took over is greater than the population of 41 individual states. So we practically made a new state in the United States, a high population state. It would be in the top 10 of most densely populated states if you add up the number of illegal immigrants that have crossed the border, not through legal means, some of which stating asylum, but most of them not even utilizing the proper asylum process. Okay, so let's continue on.
Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill, is joining me right now to discuss a little bit more on this. Niall, as we see, Governors Abbott and DeSantis, they sent migrants to sanctuary cities. A similar idea had been proposed under the Trump administration. ICE officials at that time deemed it illegal. So what's the difference between what's happening now and what was proposed by the previous administration?
Now, before he even talks, what sticks out in your mind right here from this title? It says, Dems outraged as GOP migrant busing campaign ramps up. Okay, hold on a minute. Let me get this straight. The Democrats were outraged, but they allowed the migrants to come over the border until it created a crisis and blamed it on the Republicans and said that they were wrong for busing those migrants to the states that are sanctuary cities or sanctuary states. Does that make any sense to you? So the Democrats express outrage. They're mad at Texas, for example, for busing those people out to the cities like Chicago, New York City, and Denver, who openly advertise that we're a sanctuary city, meaning we're not going to abide by immigration law. We'll let anyone stay here despite federal law. So in other words, there's no rule of law in sanctuary cities. Forget the fact that it's federal law. We're going to do it anyway. No rule of law. But they're outraged that we bust them to the cities who openly advertise that they don't have a problem with it. But we're just supposed to not say anything, excuse me, about the fact that it's the Biden administration that was the root of the problem, despite Kamala Harris going all the way down to South America to find the root. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are the root. They're the ones who created the situation to allow the biggest influx of illegal aliens to pour into this country in the history of the United States. Now, let's move on.
It's not particularly clear what is different. The ICE officials in the Trump administration's case in 2019 pushed back against that plan because that plan had been framed as an attempt to essentially embarrass either sanctuary cities or Democrats. Now, in the case of Governors DeSantis and Abbott, they appear to be doing the same thing, and they appear to be making those priorities or motivations quite plain.
Wow. And I do remember that. So they're saying that they only bust those people to the sanctuary cities to embarrass Democrats or embarrass the sanctuary cities. They signed up for this. They openly advertise, we take illegal immigrants despite federal law. But the governor of Texas, for example, is the one who's wrong for busing them to those cities. And it was only done to embarrass the Democrats who let them into the country in the first place. Let's continue on.
So what has changed is not entirely clear, save for the fact that obviously as president, Mr. Trump was operating according to federal law, whereas these governors are the governors of their own states.
And Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, obviously, as we've been talking about, put in charge, essentially. I remember in the very beginning, she would often speak to root causes of this mass migration toward the United States. But what happened to her plans to stop migration at the source in Central America, the talks that she was having with different Central American nations about why this wasn't safe?
Basically, what happened is that those attempts to address the root causes were and are, by their nature, long-term issues. And they don't really address the short-term flow of migrants. So there were, for example, rather elevated ideals about combating corruption in the so-called Northern Triangle countries like Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador, and an attempt, or at least an ambition, to boost economic development in those countries. But the nature of goals like that is that they take a long time to achieve.
Now, let's just stop right here so I can mention two obvious things. First of all, so she has to go all the way down to South America to find out what the root problems are, and they don't know how to solve the problem. Well, have you ever heard of such a thing called the military, the armed forces? The U.S. Coast Guard. The United States has the largest, strongest, and most technologically advanced military in the entire world, as my phone rings. The largest military in the entire world. That was my wife calling, by the way. So I'm scratching my head wondering, why is it not hideously obvious, and why do people not talk about the inaction of the President of the United States, who is the commander-in-chief of the largest military in the entire world, in the globe, but they don't know how to stop the influx of illegal aliens that includes drug dealers, that includes terrorists, that includes human traffickers. And before you even say it, I know some people think that's racist. Not all of them, but we know that if we let everyone through, we are not going to be able to stop the terrorists. We would not be able to stop the human traffickers. We would not be able to stop the drug dealers. Okay, so why would the United States, the most powerful country in the world, sit there claiming that they don't know how to stop this massive influx of people at the southern border? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't more people talk about that? What is it? Is it just me? Let me know. Post in the comments and tell me, am I crazy for thinking this? Now, in Alaska, Do you think we have some military up there because of a certain country that's right across what is the Bering Strait? A country that is an adversary of the United States. Do you think that the army of Russia could just come straight over that sliver of ocean and pop right onto the state of Alaska? Do you think that we would say, what do we do to stop this? Now, we can spend $200 billion on missiles, bombs, munitions to send to Ukraine to fight and to blow up the Russians. But then we're going to sit here like idiots and wonder how to stop the influx of illegal aliens at the southern border. Help me out on that one, please. Let's continue the video.
Meanwhile, this is obviously a damaging political issue. We assume Vice President Harris might have future political ambitions herself, especially if President Biden doesn't run for re-election. And so she has clearly backed away from the issue.
And
yeah, now that's ironic right there. That's irony there. Not only is she the front runner, but they successfully pushed Joe Biden out of the picture. And I feel sorry for Joe Biden because it was wrong. It was wrong. This was not the way for her to be running for president with not one single Democratic vote. No democracy in this party after they shoved Joe Biden to the side. So let's continue on.
And at a time when everything seems to just be intensifying every single week. Since she went to the border last June, the Border Patrol reports a 6% increase in encounters. We could give massive numbers for some of those encounters. But how secure is the border? She had actually spoken about this in an interview live about the border being secure. But don't we have so much evidence contrary to that?
Yes.
We do have evidence contrary to that. I don't think the word secure is a great word to use when it seems like for the first time ever there will be more than 2 million encounters in one fiscal year.
That's right.
Between Border Patrol agents and people who do not have papers, who are unauthorized migrants. I do want to just mention one caveat to that, Adrian, which is that people do have a right to claim asylum, whether or not they have other papers to permit their admission into the United States. That's a subject that sometimes gets lost. But is the border secure? It's very difficult to claim that given the numbers that we're seeing.
I wanted to ask you about the fact that now we're hearing from more Democratic mayors and Democratic leaders who at one time probably would not have spoken about this issue in the way that, for example, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has. Calling for this state of emergency, I believe. The Democratic mayors and governors who are actually speaking out have said things that are more akin to what Republican leaders have been saying.
Yeah, now, I tell you what, how convenient it is that we have forgotten all about that. Do you remember the Democratic governors and even mayors in some of the cities? Do you remember what happened in Denver? What the mayor did when they shut down the sanctuary city status and told people, we don't know where you're going to go, but you got to get the heck out of here. Do you remember what happened in New York City where the ding-a-ling mayor said that he felt like the administration was breaking their back with all of the illegal immigrants that were flooding into the sanctuary city? Do you remember that? Nobody's talking about that right now. Nobody. And we don't hear those same Democratic mayors and governors speaking a mumbling word about Kamala Harris right now. Kamala, I can't remember because I'm shooting a video. I don't know how you pronounce that right. I believe it is Kamala. But let's continue the video.
Do you think that we can actually come to some bipartisan agreement now that we have a little more consensus?
I'm not sure, because to me the boundaries or the contours of that consensus seem quite limited. It is certainly true that people like Mayor Bowser here in Washington, D.C. have sought more resources, have sought more help in order to aid and provide for these migrants.
Yeah, and they did. They asked the federal government to give more money, print more money, right? They printed out of thin air. They asked for more money so that they can pay for all of the resources that they need for these millions and millions of people pouring in to those sanctuary cities. Chicago is a prime example, and I've talked about it before. And so what's the end result of these cities and states asking the federal government to print more money to pay for this influx of people that they refuse to address, while they act like there's nothing that can be done about it, even though we have the largest military in the entire world? We're the ones that pay for it when we end up paying double for all of our groceries in the grocery store because we destroy the value of the dollar as inflation surges due to all of the money printing. Now, let's continue.
Or asylum seekers, but that is still quite a long way away from the kind of rhetoric that we hear from people like Governor DeSantis or Governor Abbott. There's a clear distinction between how these migrants are seen and the extent to which it is seen as a moral problem or as something that just has to be taken care of.
Right. Obviously, a lot of people want compassion, and at the same time, they want some sort of solution. Niall, always good to see you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Now, I tell you what, this video is going to get taken down. My video could even be taken down. But I want you guys to tell me in the comments what you think about people's short-term memory as we give Kamala Harris a complete pass, as we pretend that she is something that she's not. While all this time, with all this video evidence right here on YouTube, while all this time, we've got the evidence showing that even Democrat leaders within the party were critical of the president and the vice president for creating this disaster at the southern border. Now, do you think any of this is going to be brought up within the Democratic Party as they just shove Kamala Harris in the front after they shut Joe Biden down? And isn't it interesting how before they shut him down, they were the first ones fighting everybody tooth and nail, calling them liars, that all of the accusations about his mental decline simply weren't true because he's as sharp as ever and he's never looked better and acted better. And then we turned right around and they said, these are from within the party, that he's not fit to run for re-election. How did that work out? I don't understand it. I just don't understand it. It seems like they've got a bulk tape eraser. You remember those bulkhead tape erasers? For those of you who are old enough to remember cassette tapes, do you remember being able to buy that thing that looked like a mini iron? So you could take your tapes that you used in your tape recorder and recorded music from the radio. You got to be about my age. I'm 56. And you would take your old tapes and use the bulk tape eraser, the bulkhead tape eraser, and iron over the tape. And it would erase all the information on that tape. So you could record music again and not have to go buy new tapes. Well, I think that the federal government and the news media that is backed by the liberal machine, I think they're using a bulkhead eraser on our brains, or at least they're trying to. They're wanting us to forget everything that we just saw in the last nearly 4 years, going on 4 years, 3.5 years worth of events, worth of craziness, madness at the completely insecure southern border. We're supposed to forget about all of that. But it's working, because as I see so many people that are so excited about Kamala Harris, they don't remember any of this. They don't remember that people even within the party were critical of the decisions that were being made. Well, the lack of decisions for handling the situation. None of them are remembering any of that. But I guess this is just supposed to work out and she's supposed to beat Donald Trump, right? I'd sure love to know what your thoughts are. Now, this is not an anti-Democratic video, because there are some great Democrats that are out there. Kamala Harris is not one of them, in my opinion. I would be behind Mr. RFK in a hot minute before I got behind Kamala Harris, but I would sure love to know what your opinion is about this. And in the meantime, I would absolutely love it if you would like, comment, and subscribe to the Go Political channel. And if you would like to help me defray the cost of producing and growing this channel, you may do so with the giving of a super thanks. And I thank you in advance. You can be like the fantastic John Luna, who dropped a 25 bomb on my head on the last video that I did about Governor J.D. Hogg, J.B. Pritzker. So I appreciate your support, guys. I've got a lot more stuff coming your way. That's all I've got for now. This is Carlton, and I am out.